Hey CFC, I really miss being with you today. I'm actually preaching at Grace Community Church in Kingsville for my friend Matt Smith, who is on a sabbatical that he's wrapping up soon. So I'm really going to miss being with you today. Just wanted to say I so enjoyed being able to have a heart-to-heart with so many of you last week. You're all my family, you're my friends, and I felt like we had a real point of contact last week talking about our vision and direction. And I wanted you to know more is coming. We're actually in the midst of an email campaign where we'd like to send out a little bit each week, just some pieces of our vision, mission, and strategy. So that's going to be coming. It's a great time to be on the email list if you're not signed up already. All you have to do is go to our website. It's at the bottom of every website page. You'll see how you can sign up and get on our email list. We want you on our team, and we can't wait to talk to you even more. Today, I'm so pumped. Russ Fisher, who is our Director of Next Steps, is going to be taking us back into our Fear series with a really helpful biblical message on overcoming the fear of man. So let's give it up for Russ as he comes to bring the word today.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you this morning. Thank you to Greg for that introduction. Like he said, he's preaching at Grace Community this week, so he asked me to fill in. As I was preparing for the message this week, I decided to go out on a limb, and in continuing our series of fear, I wanted to share with you one of my greatest fears. So here's one of my greatest fears. I am afraid to go to the doctor. I'm a very squeamish person, and I don't like a lot of medical terminology or anything like that. And so when I look at my calendar and I realize I've got a doctor's appointment coming up, I start to feel the anxiety building within me. And so regardless of what doctor that may be, whether it's the dentist or to go get a routine blood draw or to go to my primary care doctor, I just feel that anxiety building as the day is approaching. Now, this is a little embarrassing, but because I'm so squeamish, often when I go to the doctor, on many occasions, actually, I will get lightheaded and actually pass out. And when I say pass out, it's not just oh man, I'm kind of swooning, seeing stars. I mean, it's down goes Frazier kind of pass out. Highly embarrassing. We'll be out for a minute or two sometimes, and the poor doctor is wondering what in the world happened to this poor guy. And I'll just share with you one embarrassing story. In this instance, I didn't actually pass out. It was even more embarrassing than that because I never told the doctor that I was feeling like I was going to pass out. I was at the orthopedist, and this is back in high school. I had actually sprained my ankle pretty severely in a soccer game, and it wasn't healing correctly, so I went to see this orthopedist, and I'm sitting on the exam table, and he starts getting really into the details about the tendons do this and the bones and the joints and all this stuff, and I'm sitting there thinking, no, we're going down the wrong path here, buddy. And I start to see the stars coming down from the ceiling, and I think, it's all over, I'm going out. But it didn't actually pass out. Instead, I broke into this profuse cold sweat, and I just had sweat pouring down my cheeks, dripping into my lap, and the doctor's face kind of changed as he's looking at me, and he was on one of those wheelie exam stools that they have in the doctor's offices a lot of times. And so he slowly wheeled himself back to the door, pushed himself back to the door, and reached back, interrupted himself as he was talking, cracked open the door and said, I'm just going to crack the door open. I think it's getting a little warm in here. And I never told him what was going on. Maybe he suspected what was going, I don't know, but I didn't pass out that time. But as you can tell, going to the doctor brings up a great deal of anxiety within me. And while that's a funny example and certainly more of a phobia than a fear, some might say, I know that there are some medical professionals here this morning, and let me just say, I know that you're just trying to help me. It's a classic case of it's me, not you. I understand that. And like I said, it's more of a phobia, maybe not so much of a fear, but I'm sure that many of us can relate to this idea of being afraid of someone, whether it's a specific person or a group of people. And often, the temptation is to allow our actions and beliefs to be influenced, to be overridden by that fear, to allow it to control us. How others are viewing us or how we may think people are viewing us, our perception of how they're viewing us. So this morning, I want to look at this idea of fear, letting the fear of others control us, consume us. As Scripture calls it, the fear of man. So this morning, let's take a look at our takeaway thoughts. It says this: what we believe about who God is determines how much control other people have over us. So what we believe about who God is determines how much control other people have over us. And as we consider this idea this morning, this idea of fear of man, I want to take a look at a proverb that speaks this idea of the fear of man. And the proverb says this: the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Now, if you're like me, you see a proverb and you think, I'm not really big on poetry, and it's kind of hard to decipher what this proverb may actually be saying. So this week, as I was preparing, I thought, okay, there must be some source of literature out there, some kind of academic writing that can help us understand this proverb and what it's saying to us and what proverbs in general often communicate to us. I thought there must be some good quotes that I can come up with from some source. And I did find a great resource in the course of my reading this week, and so I want to go ahead and share that with you now. It comes from a book called No, No, Yes, Yes. And at the moment, Matt, who's running sound, has his finger on the mute button because he's saying, Fisher's getting off the rails faster than I thought. We're going to have to shut him down here sooner than we were expecting to. But I promise I'm not trying to be condescending to you. My wife and I have an 11-month-old at home, and I don't have much free time for reading, so a lot of my reading time happens with my daughter. And so when I read this proverb, I thought, you know what, I think I've got a good book that helps us understand what this proverb is saying to us. So like I said, I've got some quotes from this book. I think you'll catch on pretty quickly to the theme. So let's take a look at the first page. It says, no, don't dump your food out all over your head or slop it out all over your head. Instead, yes, what do you want to do? You want to eat your food nicely with your spoon. That's how we eat. The second one I can definitely relate to. No, don't write on the wall and the dog. My wife and I have a yellow lab, and our daughter is obsessed with him, and she's really gotten into interacting with him. So this is funny to me at the moment, but in a few months, this may be a reality for us that we're dealing with. So no, don't write on the wall. Instead, yes, you want to write on the paper. Next up, no, don't destroy the books and magazines. That's not what we do with them. Instead, yes, we sit quietly and read our books. We don't tear them to shreds. The next one we have, now this one is a little scary. No, you don't pull the sleeping cat's tail. I don't want to think about what happened after this scene took place to this poor baby. Yes, we pet the kitty while it's sleeping quietly. That's what we do. And then finally, last but not least, no, we don't thunk our sister over the head with the mallet. Instead, we nicely tap in the pegs while she sits there and watches us. And I'm sorry, I know some of you say, you know what, I come in here for an hour and send my kids back to the Kidman area so I don't have to think about this thing. I know I'm causing PTSD. Like I said, it's funny for me at the moment. We only have one daughter, but in future years, this may not be so funny to me. Well, that's exactly what this proverb is saying to us this morning. It's saying, no, not this. Don't fear man. Instead, yes, there's something better. Trusting in God is so much better than fearing man. Not this, but that. But what's our natural default so often? It's to allow the fear of others to override all of the other things. Just like when I go to the doctor, I know that they're trying to help me, but that doesn't take away my squeamishness, and it takes over, and I pass out or sweat or whatever my reaction may be. Now, when we hear this idea of fearing man, a lot of times our minds may go to more of a extreme thought of what does that mean to fear man? We think of oppressive governments in other countries that will imprison people without cause for years on end. We hear these terrible stories, or we think of movies that we watch where there's some secret organization that's really running the show, and they'll kidnap people and they'll disappear and their family has no clue what happened to them and they just disappear. Or more realistically, for some of us, we might think of, I just did my taxes and I don't have receipts to back everything up, and what if the IRS comes knocking on my door and puts me in prison because I promise I wasn't lying, but I don't have things to support what I was saying on my taxes. Our minds often go to more of an extreme thought, but that's where the wisdom of this proverb really begins to come out, because it goes to a much deeper level than that. It's commenting on the human condition on a much deeper level. So what then does it mean to fear man? Well, I'll offer an example of somebody that I know. We'll call him Tim for example's sake. Tim had a boss who I would guess the majority of the people in this room would describe as a jerk. I mean, this guy, he always had something negative to say, never anything positive to say to Tim and his coworkers. He was always putting them down. He was always criticizing them. He was always speaking to them crassly and trying to manipulate them, pit them against each other. It was a very challenging situation. And Tim began to think, man, this guy could come in someday. He got caught off in traffic coming here and fly off the handle at me for no good reason. I could be without a paycheck next week. And so that really started to override Tim's actions at work. He started to work more and more hours. Maybe if I can get this guy to give me some kind of praise, then I won't get fired, or at least I'll be on better terms with him. And so he started working more and more hours, like I said, and it started to consume him. Because when he was at work, he wasn't at home. And when he was at home, he was still thinking about work. So no matter what, he wasn't present with his family like he should have been. And it began to affect his health. He wasn't eating the way that he should. He wasn't sleeping the way that he should. And it began to really eat away at him. And the fear took control. It began to grip him. Now, for some of you, you're saying, yeah, that's exactly me. For the past decade and a half, that's been my boss, and I can relate to that story. But again, for some of us, maybe that's not us. We haven't experienced that kind of situation. And again, that's where we see the wisdom of this proverb reaching into all areas of our lives. And so this week, I consulted a few people and asked them, hey, what are some ways that you just subtly see this idea of the fear of man creeping into your life, into your relationships, and controlling you in your interactions with other people? And so I came up with a list. It's obviously not exhaustive, but maybe some of you can relate to some of these examples. For instance, this idea of making sure that our kids are safe. Yes, that's a good thing, but sometimes that takes over, that overrides our thought processes, and we want to control every single interaction that our children have and be there and take care of them in every instance, and it's not practical, and that begins to wear on us because there are people out there that we know we can't trust. Or maybe for some of us, it's also to do with our kids, but it's more on the parenting front, and we think, man, my sister is always saying that stuff about how my son acts up. Well, my kids don't do that, and I'm pretty sure she's being critical of my parenting style. Or maybe for you, that's a spouse that talks to you that way, or doesn't say anything at all, but you think in your mind, are they thinking that about me? And so you try to control that situation and show that you're being a good parent in some way, even though everybody else knows that you are. Or maybe for some of you, it's maintaining that socioeconomic standing that you have. A neighbor gets a new car every 2 years. I don't want them to think that I'm falling behind with things, so should I be getting a new car every 2 years? Are they thinking lesser of me because I'm not doing that? Not that it's a bad thing to buy a new car every 2 years, but when we're trying to control that fear of how other people are perceiving us or thinking of us, again, it begins to creep in, that fear of man. My wife, Victoria, shared this one with me, the idea of mom guilt. Maybe you're staying full-time home with your kids, a full-time mother at home, and you look on Facebook and you see your college roommate, and she's a VP at a company. She's got 2 kids just like you, and hey, she just got that personal record in that half marathon last week, and she's going on vacation to the Caribbean next week. And you used to keep up with her, but then you start to realize, I think she thinks that I'm lazy because I stay home with my kids and she has all of this stuff going on. So how can I show, what kind of Facebook post can I put up there to show that I'm not that? How can I control that situation? Or on the flip side of that, maybe you're a mom that works full-time and you feel guilty because, again, your sister stays home full-time with her kids, and you think to yourself, does she think that I'm not being a good parent because I don't have as much time with my kids? These are just some of the things that creep into our head. Or maybe, talking to our younger population this morning, maybe you're graduating high school in just a few weeks. Congratulations if you are, that's wonderful. But maybe you're graduating high school in a few weeks, and you're going off to college, but you don't know what your major is yet. And so tomorrow at the Memorial Day picnic, your grandparents are going to corner you and start asking you, what are you going to major in? And so you start thinking, well, it's not totally a lie if I say that, but if I beat them to the punch and just come up with something, they'll leave me alone. Or maybe you just graduated college, and 4 years ago you had that conversation with your grandparents at the Memorial Day picnic, and then tomorrow you're going to have to tell them, well, I did finally figure out that major thing, but I don't know what career path I'm going to be taking. And you think, well, that lie worked back then, maybe it'll work this time too. And again, we want to control that situation. Or maybe you're at the end of your career, and your younger brother, he's 10 years younger than you, he always likes to rib you about things. And you know tomorrow, again, at the Memorial Day picnic, there's a lot of things going on here, a lot of fear of man at the Memorial Day picnic. Maybe he's going to say to you, hey, you slowing down? You're going to retire? You're getting lazy, getting weak? And you feel that pressure because after 40 years in the same career, you think to yourself, he thinks that I'm lazy because I'm going to retire. And so you think, maybe I just won't go, or maybe I'll avoid him, I won't talk to him. How can I control that situation and take control over it? Well, what's the common thread woven throughout all of these stories? Maybe some of them relate to you, maybe some of them at least sparked within you some kind of feeling, some kind of fear that you experience when you're around someone in particular or just a group of people. Well, as the proverb says, the common thread throughout is that this fear of man becomes a trap. It's a snare. It pins you down, so it's all you can think about. It makes sure that you don't move. And so you try to control the situation, but really, the situation begins controlling you. This is really where the wisdom of this proverb starts to come out in the subtleties of life. Again, we're seeing this, no, not this. Don't fear man. There's something so much better. Trusting in God is so much better because when you fear man, it's going to eat you up. Not that that fear is not present, not that there are realities behind it, but when you let it become a snare, it's going to eat you up. So what then is the alternative that we're offered in this proverb? The yes is to trust God. But again, we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to trust God? Well, to answer that question, I want to turn to the words of Jesus that he speaks to his followers in the historical account that Matthew recorded for us of Jesus' life and the words that he spoke. And this is what he says to his followers. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. Now, the thing that I find interesting about this passage and what Jesus says to his followers here is directly before Jesus says this to his followers, he says to them, expect to be severely mistreated. Not there's a possibility, not this may happen. He says it's going to happen. You will be severely mistreated by others. But then what does he say to them? He says, don't fear those people. Do not fear those people. Why? Because there is one who's greater. There is one who truly has control over the situation. Jesus is pointing to the character of God, and not only the character of God, but also the care that God has for his followers. Look at what he says. He says, 2 sparrows are sold for a penny. So he's saying to them, to you, these sparrows, 2 of them, it's a penny apiece. It's completely insignificant in our minds, in his followers' minds that he's speaking to in this passage. But what does he say? The Father cares for them. Not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the Father. The Father knows what's taking place. So how much more does he care for you? He cares for these 2 small birds. How much more does he care for you? He's showing God's care, God's gracious love. Again, I want to highlight the fact that he's not saying you won't be mistreated, that there's reality behind that fear, but he's saying don't let that fear become a snare. Instead, trust in the one who truly cares for you. And what does that bring when we trust in God? Well, again, the proverb tells us it brings us to a place of safety. Whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. We find safety. We're no longer preoccupied by the fears of others, but instead we're captivated by who God is, a loving, gracious, and caring God. Ultimately, what does our fear come down to? It comes down to the question of who are we trusting? Are we trusting ourselves, or are we trusting in God, the one who truly has control over our fears, control over our fear of others? I mean, if you think about it, my fear of the doctor is really about the fact that I don't have control when I go to the doctor, whether they tell me there's something wrong with me or not. And I don't like that. So I want to control that situation. But the reality is I have no control over that situation. And so my anxiety builds. And then I end up hitting the deck. I don't like that. And that's, I feel, what many of us feel when we are grasped by that fear of man. We don't like the fact that we can't control how others think about us, how others act towards us. So we should turn to the one who does have control over that and cares about us. So let me remind us again this morning of our takeaway thought. What we believe about who God is determines how much control other people have over us. When we're placing our trust in God, that control of others is minimized. Why? Because really, like I said, with the doctor, I want to control that situation, but it ends up controlling me. It ends up trapping me and ensnaring me. But instead, we should place our trust in God, the one who truly cares and has control over our lives and the situations that we face. Now, as I was preparing the message this week, I was bouncing some ideas off of Greg, and he reminded me of a quote that he's used a few times in the past, a quote from Ann Landers, who Ann Landers, I guess, posted in newspapers. Well, hold on, let me back up. I'm showing my age here because I just said that you post in a newspaper like you post on Facebook. So. And also on top of that, I didn't tell Greg this, so he's going to watch this message maybe later and realize that he told me, oh yeah, I quoted Ann Landers, and I had no clue who Ann Landers was, and just pretend like I did, and then I went home and Googled it. And so if you don't know who Ann Landers is actually a ghostwriter. It was 2 different women that wrote for a Chicago newspaper, and they wrote an opinion piece, and they would offer up advice to people. And one of them put this in there at one point in time. It says, at age 20, we worry about what others think about us. At age 40, we don't care what they think of us, which I would beg to differ for many of us. At age 60, we discover they haven't been thinking of us at all. There's some truth there. And sometimes it's beyond 60 that some of us may realize that. But I want to encourage you by saying life is too short to get caught up in what others might be thinking about us, to allow our fear of others to really take hold and control us. Again, the fear may be a reality, like my friend Tim. He may have lost his job because his boss just didn't like him, like he didn't like anybody. But are we allowing that fear to control us, or are we trusting in God to find safety from that fear? And that's what this proverb is explaining to us this morning. Well, as Greg has done in the past, in recent weeks, he's offered a concrete way of really applying the truth of Scripture to our lives by presenting some kind of challenge or question for us to consider. And when he started this series on fear, he asked us to go and ask someone that's close to us, that knows us well, can give us an honest answer. Where do you see fear playing out in your life? And so he presents with that question. And if you're like me, and Greg shared this sentiment, we don't really want to know the answer to that question. We don't want to ask people. Or if we ask people, we maybe kind of beat around the bush to get an answer or whatever it may have been because we wanted to check it off our list if you're task-oriented, but you also didn't fully want to know the answer. And so this morning I want to offer up a similar point of application for us. And I want you to ask someone this week, someone close to you that can give you an honest answer, where do you see fear playing out in my relationships and interactions with other people? Where do you see me getting ensnared, trapped by this fear of others? How would it look different for us as a community if we started taking just even small steps to trust in God more and not fear man? What would that look like? I'm not talking an overnight overhaul, but small steps as we pursue trusting in God more and more. And like I shared with my fear of the doctor, so often we want to control a situation and we can't. And we got caught up in that. And ultimately, we're placing our trust somewhere. Is it in ourselves? Is it in God? Is it someone outside of ourselves? So I present that challenge to you too. Consider when someone gives you an honest answer about this week, where am I allowing it to control me? But then who am I placing my trust in? If it's not God, who is it in or what is it in? And I think over time, like I said, in small steps, we'll come to realize and recognize that God truly is the one who cares for us. And he is the one who, even in those moments of fear, offers us a place of refuge, a place of safety. So I hope and pray that we can take a good application point this morning, look at this proverb, the wisdom that it offers, and apply it to our lives and see change in them. Let me pray for us in closing this morning. Father, I just thank you for the wisdom that you offer to us through this proverb and through the words of your Son. I just thank you that you do care for us like you do the two sparrows that Jesus speaks of. I just pray, Lord, that we would be able to get honest answers this week about where we're fearing man and just be able to step out in faith and trust you, Lord, more and more, even if it's just in small ways over a long period of time. So I just pray, Lord, that you would impact our hearts and minds with this truth and wisdom this morning, and that we would see change within our community because of it. Pray all this in Jesus' name, amen.